Hello, my name is Wolfgang Carstens, and welcome to Poets Underground, a poetry show that celebrates and showcases the best and the brightest authors currently working the marrow of contemporary poetry. My guest tonight, joining us live from Boulder, Colorado, is Mr. Lawrence Gladeview. Mr. Gladeview's publications include Just Ignore the Beer Stains, Fast Times, Lowlifes, and Occasionally Love, and most recently, Praying for a Spare. Mr. Gladeview, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Poets Underground.
Thank you for having me, Wolf. Very excited to be with you tonight.
Yeah, you know, we've done a lot of radio shows. This is the first time I've seen you in living color.
You got to get yourself out to Colorado more often, my friend.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting because one of my questions for you was, what is the poetry scene like in Boulder, Colorado?
The poetry scene out here is older as opposed to younger, which doesn't bother me a bit.
Oh, yeah. Right on. So have you been doing lots of readings out there?
I have. I've been reading everywhere from breweries with Jason Hardung to art galleries downtown with Jerry Smaldone and everywhere in between. It's been a lot of fun. The Denver poetry scene is very inclusive. It brings a lot of us writers together and promotes one another work evenly. And it's fantastic. It doesn't matter if I'm reading next to somebody who loves religion or who loves love. We all get together and we deliver it to the audience and they eat it up and love it.
That's awesome, man. So you mentioned you did a reading at a brewery. So there has to be a good story there, man. How did that go down? How did that come about?
Let me tell you something, Wolf. It was the most lively reading I have ever read at and been a part of. It was me, Jason Hardung, and a few other poets that he had invited out. We read all night. There had to have been an audience of about 75 beer-guzzling lovers of the written word, of the spoken word, and it was electric, my friend. It was so much fun. We went until they kicked us out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know, I wanted to ask you, what is the importance of poetry readings, like getting out there and reading poetry and its effect on your craft and your writing in general?
For me, it's the camaraderie, and for me, it's getting to know people at a deeper level than just slapping hands and saying hi on the street or on a bar stool, and you get to share something. Everybody shows up to a poetry reading and wants to make the audience react and feel, and to be a part of that is very exciting. And, you know, for me, those live readings incorporate music, they incorporate visual art presentations and the whole nine, Wolf, and it brings everybody to the table like a big poker game, and it's just a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So from getting out there and getting involved in these readings, what is the most important piece of advice you've ever received regarding your writing, regarding your reading, your craft?
I think the best piece of advice was to speak loudly and confidently. When people are in the audience, they want to believe what you're telling them. They want to feel how you feel speaking to them. And when you go out there and you project yourself in a way that makes you a part of what you're reading, I think really connects with the audience and keeps them engaged. And that's how poetry can sucker punch somebody in the stomach and make their tears fall down their cheeks. And that's what I think is very exciting and communal about it. In a world in which we live very isolated, so to speak, when you're at a poetry reading, it's everybody in the room together as one, and, it makes your heart race.
Nice, nice. You know, your friend Bukowski, he wrote, never think what you wrote yesterday is good enough. So I wanted to put the question to you, is what you wrote yesterday good enough?
No, it's never good enough, and it's funny that you asked this because in going through a lot of the poems that I was picking out for tonight's reading and going through the past publications, I find myself saying, I hate this. I can't believe I ever actually wrote this. But if you use that as more ammunition for what you want to say and how you want to keep developing your writing, it's something that can really add the fuel to the fire and present a challenge, which I think is why half the reason I write. You always do it to me with short poetry. I write longer poems. I like to tell a story, and you tell me to cut the fat, and that is a challenge I gladly accept every day of the week. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue getting better past something that was already praised as being pretty good.
Right, yeah, fair enough. Well, so looking back at your work, from Just Ignore the Beer Stains to Praying for a Spare, what is the progression in your work?
The progression in the work is the character development. I think that in Praying for a Spare, I've really brought together people who are a fabric in their own group. And in Just Ignore the Beer Stains, I have a lot of different characters, but there isn't as much depth with those characters. It's a very topical look at a landscape of experiences, where in Praying for a Spare, it's a very focused experience, but the character development gets much deeper. And because of that, the more and more characters that are involved, it's more of a story, and it's more of a presentation of a community and a group, as opposed to just a snapshot of life.
Right. Well, you know, we mentioned before, too, with your Rebecca poems, your reading series poems, you do have this certain mythology that you're working on, and Praying for a Spare seemed to really take that to a whole other level, which was beautiful to see. I mean, it was beautiful to read. You know, you really nailed that one hard.
Thank you. And I can tell you that for me, I'm starting to find more complexity in who I am as a person. I'm named after my grandfather out of Pennsylvania that I never met before. And at a family reunion that summer, Wolf, on July 4th in Easton, Pennsylvania, I found an old bowling program from 1957 from a league that my grandfather had bowled in and had been the chairman of. Wow. And I got into this deep mythology of him and his friends working Bethlehem steel, breaking their backs to serve their families, and having bowling as their one salvation. And for me, writing this book was almost trying to connect with him in a way that I was never able to, because he was never alive for when I was born.
Right. Right. So, you know, looking at everything you've done, what are the essential qualities in a Lawrence Gladeview poem? Like, when everything starts firing on all four cylinders, what's at play?
I think the play is the humanistic fabric that we all have in our bones and in our blood, and what we find funny, what we find repulsive, and what we find really touches our heart that makes us want to cry or scream. And in a Lawrence Gladeview poem and a Lawrence Gladeview book, what I want to convey is an emotional experience that makes the reader react to what they're seeing and what they're processing on the page. And I don't think that, you know, I'm doing anybody any justice and doing the ink any justice by writing something that is full of filler and that is full of something that makes someone say, okay, on to the next page, on to the next one. And I don't want anybody to think that about any poem that Lawrence Gladeview writes. I think that any poem that anybody reads by me, it should make them at least hate me for writing a shitty poem. And that at least has gotten something across in terms of a message. But the humanistic quality in being able to connect with, from Alberta to Colorado.
Right. So let me ask you then, what would the end game be for your work? Like when it's all said and done, what do you want people to say about Lawrence Gladeview, the writer, Lawrence Gladeview, the performer, and about your books?
You know, honestly, I haven't thought about that before. What I like, and kind of circling back to your first question about the poetry scene and the reading scene here in Colorado and around the Front Range, I like that people invite me and they think of me. And I guess that's the end game of my poetry, is that people consider me for Poets Underground, that people can consider me to come and read in front of an audience of 50 in a gallery, you know, in downtown Denver off an alley, or that people consider me to come drink beer with them in Fort Collins and read with 7 other writers that they thought, you know, would fill seats. And I guess just to be considered, honestly, would be the end game. I like having a close friendship network with you and a few other writers, Rob and John, and the camaraderie that's there, and to be considered and to be able to share, I think, is the greatest compliment of all. And I guess that would be the end game.
Right. Great answer. You know, I off the top of my head here, your work has been compared to the work of John Yammer's. So, from your point of view, where does his work end and where does yours begin? Where's the difference? You're both conversational poets. You both tell stories in your poems. I mean, I know what my answer is. Like, I mean, I know what the difference is for me, but I'm curious to know for you.
I don't even know if I've ever talked with John about this particular topic, but when I first started reading his poems, I actually didn't care for him. I thought he was a bit of a prick. And then I started reading more, and then I started to dialogue with him. And I wanted to talk with him more about how he shares his stories and how he conveys a message through very common language, which I think is the most powerful form of communication. And we've actually developed quite a nice friendship. His poetry ends in a very more script, short format, jab form, where mine picks up in the long boxers 9 or 10 rounds and the long jabs and the haymakers at the end of a short sequence. And that's where I think that we really differ, although I really do always give him credit for helping me see that titles are bullshit, and to lead right into your poem and to lead right to your point is a much better way of engaging an audience, and to him I always tip my hat to that. But I would say that that's kind of the contrast, or where his ends and mine begins. He has such a great way of using word economy and the short play of life, the sleight of hand, if you will, which takes a lot of patience, and I still don't think I have that patience. And so for me, that's why I'm a little bit more long-winded.
Right, fair enough. Well, okay. I'm going to throw another, I don't think it's a tough one, but is there an underlying philosophy running through your poetry? Like if someone was to come to me and say, hey, Wolfgang, what's the philosophy on your poetry? I'd say live today, tomorrow never comes, right? Seize the moment. For you, what is that underlying philosophy?
I think for me, the underlying philosophy is to appreciate small moments in every day. A lot of people walk through life on autopilot. I was just talking about this with my wife the other night, and a lot of people are living their life on autopilot, whether or not it's through their kids or through their pets, or whether or not it's through their job. And I don't participate. I'm not living my life on autopilot. I'm not just going to maintain, as a lot of people say they're doing, surviving, so to speak. I don't survive. I try to thrive. And it doesn't matter if I'm cleaning a toilet when I was a janitor. It doesn't matter if I'm in a relationship with a lover. It's you always want to do something small every day to appreciate it. And because of that, each day is a blessing. As you always say, another good day above the blades of grass. And I agree. I like and cherish every day that I have, whether or not it's raining or whether or not the sun's shining on my face. And I think that a lot of people overlook that. And that's what I really like to thrive on. And that's what really puts the fuel in my tank, is every day. It doesn't matter if it's a bar stool or it doesn't matter if it's a library.
Gorgeous answer, man. Gorgeous. Okay. It's funny. Why do you write poetry? I mean, why bother writing at all? I ask this of all my guests, and sometimes I think we almost kill poetry. But why do you write?
Oh, man, I write so I can connect. I write so I can express. It's engaging for me to write. It's cathartic. It's something that I think, I don't know. It's very hard to put the tip of my tongue on it. I like the connections. I like the relationships. I like seeing other people enjoy something so intimate and so passionate that not everybody appreciates or everybody stops to think about. And I think it makes me a better person. I think it makes me a better human to participate in poetry, because by doing so, it makes me go to places in my mind and in my body that, I might not otherwise do if I was stuck up on an iPad, or I might not otherwise do if I was stuck up box. And I think that by writing, I can really insert myself into other people's lives at a more visceral level. And it's not just that bullshit, oh, what do you do for a living? Or, oh, that's nice that you live over in that part of town. It's actually talking about something that matters. And it's connecting with other humans on this planet and living outside of a box. That's why I write.
Right. So, let me ask you, is there a quintessential Lawrence Gladeview poem? Like, something that just encapsulates what you're trying to achieve?
I don't know if I'm trying to achieve it. There's definitely a quintessential Lawrence Gladeview poem in terms of where I started my writing and why I write, which is a lot around my wife and our relationship and our experiences in life. We don't have children. We don't have pets. It's her and I against the world. And so she's generally the center of my poetry, and she's not a fan, so to speak. She studied the stuff. I didn't. But she respects it, and she appreciates it, and she supports it. And that's the achievement for me, I suppose, is to have my wife support me in something that is not necessarily something she embraces, but it's something that she understands that I do, and it's something that I like, and that it's something that, for me, gives me happiness in my life. And to have that kind of support and that kind of rapport is really terrific, and I think that is really the definition of the achievement of my poetry is to show the love and the relationship that I have with my wife.
Well, if you have that poem handy, I'd love to hear it.
I do. This is I've read this poem so many times, and I love reading it every time. I never tire of reading it, whether or not it's in a live audience or whether or not it's over the computer. So this one is from Just Ignore the Beer Stains. It's entitled My Biggest Fan. Rebecca, would you mind reading this draft and giving me your thoughts? Sure. Not bad. Do you think I transitioned into the third stanza too quickly? No, I think it's okay. Rebecca, you're not going to read my book, are you? Of course I will, Larry. I'll put my copy in the bathroom.
Very nice. Very nice. Which, of course, is the greatest compliment, as you well know, because that's where the best books wind up. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gladeview, I'm going to give you 15 minutes, my friend. I want you to lay down some bombs. Let's rock the alphabet, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Larry Gladeview. Stage is yours, my friend.
So I'm going to start tonight's reading by reading from Praying for a Spare. It is my most recent book through Epic Rights. I'm going to go ahead and read the entire collection for you this evening.
Nice.
Earl's marriage. Earl's marriage is falling apart over family jealousy. Bill scratched a $500 winner at lunch. Dana's been battling leukemia for 3 years. And Sandy's son is the first in her family to go to college. Me? It's just my usual Tuesday night bowling with the team. And I can't help but smile about how this pack of alley cats is the one thing that is dependable in our lives. Bill came back. Bill came back from the bar with a round of beers for the team. After hitting that scratcher earlier, drinks are on me tonight, he said. Bill, you think that's a good idea? Larry, I appreciate your concern. I know I've been going lately, but these clown shoes and my bowling buds are what pull me through. It feels good to bring back a little honey to the hive. Share with my family and head back out again into the sun, ready for what's next. Dana called. Dana called and asked me to meet her for pints and pins. While we were tying our laces, she told me, I was laid off today, Larry. They said my health insurance was costing them too much. Shit, Dana. I'm sorry to hear that. Without thinking, I asked her, what are you going to do now? Grabbing her ball from the return tray, Dana half smiled and told me, pray for a spare. Sorry I'm late, guys. Sorry I'm late, guys, Dana said as she sat down and took out her shoes. I was the first to pipe up. So, how was your doctor's appointment? It went well. I was pretty nervous when I first got there, but my anxiety was just about gone by the time it was over. Can we take that as good news? I asked her. With a growing smile, Dana said, ladies and gentlemen, better give me your orders by the end of tonight. I'm hitting the pot shop first thing in the morning. Whether you are heartbroken, cheerful, struggling, or well off, no matter if you're drunk, high, medicated, or sober. Some evenings at the alley, you spend your entire night trying to keep the weight from slipping through your fingers and into the gutter.
Beautiful.
We call ourselves the Wreckers, and always joke, we're all brew and no balls. The point being, we don't bowl for the trophies, or the plaques, or even the prize money. Although, Earl came close once, and he was more excited than when his third kid was born. Nope, we do it because we respect and appreciate how a couple of turkeys can make such a difference. Hey, Larry. Hey, Larry, are you one of those bowling is my religion guys? Roy asked me sarcastically, pointing to my bowling bag. Well, I'm not one for religion, but bowling probably comes as close as I get. Patting me on the back, Roy said, you should come to Mass with me and the family Sunday. Thanks, Roy, but I'm good. I already have a once-a-week obligation, and it gives me all the salvation I need. I thought bowling was just a couple of cigarette-sucking, beer-guzzling bums getting together, competing for meaningless trophies to build up their self-confidence. Boy, was I wrong, Roy told me after chatting with Earl and Dana. Thanks for that, I said. But what made you think that that's what I did every Tuesday night? I figured you came here as an excuse to smell like smoke and booze without being judged, Roy said. Roy, I said, you need to come to my church more often. After work, I stopped by the lanes for some me time. Walking to the bar, I saw Sandy at the other end of the alley. I headed over and said, you too? Nodding to her beer and single scorecard. With Joey at college, it's hard living in an empty house, she said. Funny thing is, when he left, I was excited to get to myself. Turns out being alone isn't all it's cracked up to be. I sat down and added myself to her scorecard. We bowled the rest of the game in silence, drinking our beers and listening to everyone else. But all the while, relishing every minute of being alone. It was a big mid-season tournament, and Earl brought his A game. Damn, Earl, they set him up and you keep knocking him down, I shouted to him. Larry, it feels so good to be on a hot streak. With my family fighting over the small stuff, it's good to come here and be in control. I am one lucky son of a gun to have friends who love me for all I am, and who have my back when I need it. Toasting Earl's mug, I said, it's not that you're lucky, Earl. You're just on the right bowling team. If it wasn't for the half-lit bubble plastic sign out front, you would have swore this one-story building with its friendly people, small kids arcade, cheap snack bar, dated daycare room, 25-cent bag lockers, and well-used events lounge was a community center. They should really fix that sign. Want to catch a movie? Want to catch a movie later tonight? Dave asked me at the mailbox. Thanks for the offer, I said, but I already have plans. The team and I are going to go bowling, boogie down at 70s later tonight. Okay, suit yourself, he replied. But for what it's worth, you may be spending a little too much time at the bowling alley. Appreciate your concern, Dave. But for me, some of life's best movies happen 10 frames at a time. And that was Praying for a Spare.
Absolutely gorgeous, man.
Appreciate it, Wolf.
Absolutely.
I've got a few more I'd like to read. We have some time, correct?
We sure do, my friend.
Terrific. like to read a poem out of an upcoming collection that I've been playing around with for a little time now. A bunch of different characters, a lot of different stories. This poem is entitled While I Was Taking Out the Trash. It's about my neighbor who lives across the street. He is someone who is a very interesting figure to me, and this was one night while I was taking out the trash. While I was taking out the trash, I heard my neighbor Carl shout over to me, "Hey Larry, you got a minute?" I walked over to Carl's driveway and said hello. "I quit my job and just found out I have cancer," he told me. "Know of any good doctors?" "Sorry, Carl, I don't. I hardly go myself." We stood there for a minute until our attention turned to my porch light coming on. "Well, I should get back to Rebecca." "You bet," Carl replied, lighting another cigarette. Before I closed my door, I looked back and watched as the light in Carl's garage flickered out.
Beautiful.
Wolf, I'm really excited. I submitted some poems to 48th Street Broadside Press upon your recommendation, and I was lucky enough to have 2 poems accepted. I'm honored to be printed by Chris and his press out of Edison, New Jersey. I have a lot of family that lives in and around Edison, New Jersey, so it's great to have that type of connection through the poetry. And this is one of the broadsides that will be published this summer, and it's entitled After a Long Dry Spell. After a long dry spell, I finally got laid. Getting home from work the next day, I noticed her panties were still on the bedroom floor. Looking for my shoes the following morning, I saw that the underwear hadn't been moved. I was about to say something, but in that moment realized I needed to stop and appreciate rather than move on. Just then she came out of the bathroom and, noticing my stare, said, "I'll be sure to pick those up later." "No," I replied reverently. "Like respected corpses, they will go untouched." This is the other poem that Chris will be publishing this summer that I am honored to be a part of the Broadside Project, and it's entitled Hooker's Row. Hooker's Row may be dangerous, but it's the cancer that makes Vince's pulse pound the most.
Nice.
I'm going to go ahead and read a few selections out of Low Life's Fast Times and Occasionally Love. This one is entitled Carla Took Me. Carla took me to a costume party in the Hollywood Hills. It was a real hipster get-together, many people talking and not enough drinking. Earl, a poet I've met at a few local readings but think is a washout with his barked-up Byron, came over to chat. "What are you supposed to be, Larry?" Swallowing my whiskey, I said, "What the fuck kind of question is that, Earl?" I enjoy ice hockey, Wolf. I hope you do too. And this one's entitled What a Hit. "What a hit," the hockey announcer said in a high voice. "At 2:30, he really tips the Toledos." "What the hell does that mean?" Rebecca asked. "That he's a big boy," I said. We kept watching, and the next whistle the announcer yelled, "And he's banged into by a pair." Drinking my Coors, I looked at Rebecca and said, "Need me to explain that one?" This one is entitled Pulling a Gun. Pulling a gun on me and my gal outside of the bar, he said, "Give me your wallet and no funny business." I went for my money but threw a poorly missed bell ringer instead. "I told you nothing funny." "Fuck you, pal. There's nothing funny about what's coming up next," I replied. "Then why is she laughing?" he said, pointing the gun at my date. This one's entitled My Pal Reggie. My pal Reggie is a vet assistant and wears scrubs to work. Whenever he's out in uniform, women always assume he's a doctor and try to pick him up. We were grabbing a drink after work Tuesday, and an obnoxious heifer approached us and started flirting with Reggie, asking him about his job. I'm a proctologist, Reggie said, thinking it would send her walking and we could get back to our beer. Boy, was he wrong. I took her home. I took her home after a few Manhattans, and before I knew it, we were getting hot and heavy in her kitchen. Motioning me to be quiet, she grabbed me by the trousers and took me upstairs. She closed the door, ripped off her blouse, and jumped on top of me. It wasn't until I was getting dressed that I noticed the prom tickets on her dresser. I'm going to go ahead and read a few poems out of Just Ignore the Beer Stains. This one is entitled Book Tour, Left Hand Book Collective, Billings, Montana. And Wolf, before I read this one, I think another achievement of my poetry can circle back to this poem and what it says in terms of losing the pretension and writing for the sake of writing. Book Tour, Left Hand Book Collective, Billings, Montana. Some empty chairs were set up in the Anarchy periodical section, and the staff had put out coffee. I signed 8 books and was told Pound would punch me right in the nose if given the chance. After refilling my Folgers black no sugar, I walked over to the register clerk and opened with, "Must be the weather." "Nah," she said, "millions of dead punks are playing tonight." Pouring a nip of Cuddy Sark into my cup, I said, "Never heard of them." Without looking up and thumbing to the next page in her Village Voice Weekly, she said, "Back at you, Mr. Grand News." All right. I'm also going to read another poem that touches on some of our discussion earlier, and it's entitled After a Reading. After a reading, an audience member told me, "You're not more yammerous, you know, so why don't you just give it a rest?" "Thanks for pointing that out," I said. "I told the damn bookstore to put Gladeview on the flyer." I think I'm just going to start reading a few fun ones, if you don't mind. I'm going to stay and just ignore the beer stains and hop around a bit. This one's entitled Fraternization. Fraternization. That's the word they use in the teacher's manual, I said. It's when an instructor becomes friends with his or her students. "Are we friends?" Patty asked as she put back on her underwear. "No, baby doll," I said. "You're a graduate now." This is one of the first poems that I wrote after Rebecca and I moved out to Colorado, and I'm still really proud of it of this day, and it's called The First Summer Out West. Rain ravished the mountains and battered the panes. We left the windows open to air the new beige carpet. Anxious and hurried, we left the job and headed home. Quad screens littered the yard. We gathered and snapped them back into place. 1,600 miles across the country, we survived first home repair.
Excellent. And you know, Mr. Gladeview, that's probably a good place to cut your reading off. And thank you, man. That was awesome. You know, if this poetry thing doesn't work out, I think you might have a future in stand-up, my friend.
Well, Wolf, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with you about writing and chat with you about poems. It's been a pleasure. It's been a fun evening, and I really look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Absolutely. So before we take off, though, I want you to tell everyone where they can find you, tell them about your books, and maybe what's coming up next.
Absolutely. I keep a website, lawrencegladeview.com, and there I have video readings, broadside printouts, all kinds of fun stuff. But it's a great place to keep in touch. I'm also on Twitter at Larry Gladeview, which is a lot of fun. I'm not on as often. And if you're in the Colorado area, I'm looking to read in a living room near you, as well as the Glovinsky Gallery downtown with Turkey Buzzard Press. As well as upcoming readings, hopefully at the Mercury Cafe and Fiction Brewing.
Excellent. Mr. Gladeview, thank you so much, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Wolf, it's been a pleasure on my end as well. Thank you so much for bringing me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Larry Gladeview, thank you.
Thank you, Wolf. Cheers.
Cheers, my friend.